Forged by the fires of our trials, refined by God's craftsmanship.
All right, everyone, welcome back to Virilis. We're here to talk about all things biblical. I'm working at this camera over here. We're doing a new camera setup because today we're going to be talking through one of our devotions. This one we're going to be using with our group. So we're going to use our podcast time to not only talk about what we're all about, but also kind of figure out our devotions. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to show you this. This is my devotion here that I'm going to do. We're going to do together. And I call it the main quest. And
so what drew you to call it this exactly?
Okay, so I'm going to do a breakneck transition. That I'm going to set the scene by talking about first. Life is kind of like a video game, where life, in life, you can do a whole lot of things that don't have anything to do with the main objective. Take Grand Theft Auto, for example. In Grand Theft Auto, you can do anything you want, basically. You can spend your whole time stealing cars, blowing up buildings and all that, and just not progress at all in the game because you're just doing the side quests. Mm-hmm. But the programmers intended for you as the game player to do the main objectives. And your character in the game won't progress at all unless you do the main quest, as the title of this devotion says. But to sort of go with this breakneck transition, I go from this idea of the main quest and what did God call us to, and talking about video games, into talking about a theory coined by Nick Bostrom, and it's called the trilemma. Have you heard of the trilemma?
I believe so.
Yeah, so Nick Bostrom coined this idea, the trilemma. And now I'm not going to quote the trilemma verbatim because it's very wordy and hard to sort of grasp, but to sum it up in a nutshell, there's really only, according to him, three possibilities. One is we have yet to discover how to make and create a simulation. Two is we have figured it out and we're outside of it, observing the simulation from the outside. But he says both one and two are very unlikely. He says the third option is close to 100%, that we have figured out how to create a simulation, but we're actually trapped inside of one. And when you hear that, people freak out and they start thinking in terms of like, well, if this whole thing's a simulation, why do anything?
Yeah, a matrix effect, if you will.
Yeah, what's his name? The Cyrus or whatever, the one who betrays Neo.
Yeah, Cypher.
Yeah, look at you. Look at that film knowledge. I love it. This is why Charlie is one of my best friends, everyone. Yes, Cypher says, like, well, Agent Smith offered me, all the wealth I want and all the, steak dinners I want. Anytime I want, so long as I just forget everything ever happened, I'll do it and I'll sell out Neo. And for those of you guys who watch The Matrix, you guys know maybe you know this, or if you don't, it's a metaphor for Neo's a metaphor for Christ. Mm-hmm. And Trinity, being the girl who is the one telling him where to go and everything, that it's all in it. I could do a whole devotion just on The Matrix. But back to what we're talking about now. Now Nick Bostrom is the guy who presented this theory, and it's such an outlandish theory. He has a lot of scientific challengers. One of the major scientific challengers is a gentleman, famously, a gentleman named Dr. Sylvester James Gates Jr. And he spent years trying to disprove this. He spent years trying to find mathematical reasons why we're not in a simulation. And he actually came across this thing that, and I'm going to quote him directly here, we have discovered that there are mathematical structures that are indistinguishable from computer code. Therefore, it could be we are in a simulation, like the Matrix. Now, he said this after years of studying advanced math and finding zeros and ones everywhere in the world. And that's evidence for we are in a simulation. And here's my response to that as a believer, it's obvious in this. Science might be studying this, but the Bible already told us everything was created by an intelligent creator. In fact, in the opening pages of the Bible, Genesis 1:1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Mm-hmm.
God told us in the Bible, which is supposed to be our instruction manual as to how to do life in this world, he told us that he created everything. Everything has been created. Everything is zeros and ones. And we can go down a rabbit hole in discussion talking about whether that's true or not. And often a counter argument to God's creation is like, well, things are billions of years old. And my question that for everyone here is Adam.
Mm-hmm.
When God created Adam, he wasn't a baby.
Nope, he was fully a man.
He was fully a man, just like Eve, full-grown woman. I believe that's how God operated when he created the universe. He created it already billions of years old. He created the earth already billions of years old because that's how he operates. He doesn't create something from nothing.
I'm going to add something
Sure.
to that too, is that, excuse me, is that a lot of people who claim that the Big Bang Theory is real is the entire universe, the entire cosmos came from nothing. And it's like, and you trust that theory? I mean, everything is really just so perfect in its setting, with where life pretty much happens. It's like, there's no way something like this can come from nothing.
Yes, that breaks the own people who argue against creation will say, listen to the science. Well, one of the first and most important rules of science is something can't come from nothing.
Yeah, there has to be a creator, because if you have a creator, there is a reason for that, and therefore there's purpose.
Mm-hmm. And so one of my favorite things about what I'm trying to do here with this devotion is to try and connect the fact that if we are in a simulation of what is the instruction manual, and that the instruction manual is the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And going back in the Old Testament, Micah 6:8 sums everything up really nicely. He says, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." And when I see that, when I see this passage, one of the most impressive things for me is this is what's all over the Bible in the New Testament. But Micah doesn't have the privilege that we all do of knowing Christ. Like the apostles and the disciples all saw the example of what it means to be a follower of God in the living example.
Mm-hmm.
They have that privilege. So to take it a step further in this sort of idea of this instruction manual, I'll go to Matthew 6:33-34. It says, "But seek his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." And then further, it says, this one really is an attention grabber. "Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own."
Mm-hmm.
People, see that and they think like, oh, what? So just not try and exist in this world? Like pretend like there's just not a world we live in?
Yeah, no, that's not what they're saying at all. It's
Right.
really, don't worry too much about tomorrow. I mean, definitely be concerned and do everything that you can to prepare for tomorrow, because that's as far as you can see into the future, but always give it back to God. Otherwise, it turns into worry, and worry just has everybody else up in arms.
Right. And I think Paul had a really good answer for it too a little later in Romans 12:2, where Paul says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind."
Mm-hmm.
And then here's in the devotion here where I shift gears into a little more hey, this is what the apostles were talking about. Is I go a little deeper in that this quote here. I'm quoting myself. This is something I'm guilty of sometimes. But
Well, if it works, it works. I say go for it.
Yeah, if it works, it works. Right here I say, although things that are illegal are things that we should avoid, that does not encompass everything that is antithetical to God's ways.
Mm.
And that's where it gets a little deeper. And I'm bringing this up because I've been doing a lot of study of neuroscience for my work in addiction recovery. And in that, I found this really sort of impactful thing that things of this world, like the internet, does the same thing to our brains as things like opiates. I know this is a small image that we're looking at here, but the brain that is addicted to internet is almost indistinguishable that of a brain that is addicted to opiates. And we have this idea that opiates, obviously, that is something that to God, but everyone spends a lot, way too much time on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
If you just look at this image, like look at it, like opiates kill millions of people a year, and it just so happens that I would say the majority of people in the United States are horribly addicted to the internet. And one of the things I've said before to you, which is one of my favorite things to say, is do you remember? I haven't told you this in a while. Do you remember what the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet is? It's been a while.
It has been a while. Refresh my memory.
Okay, the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet is W. W.
Ouch.
Yeah. Think about that.
666.
Yeah.
that's more than scary.
Right. And I'll just go a little further in quoting myself here, but
2 for 2.
2 for 2. So, in the study of neuroscience, I found dopamine is what drives all of addiction, and says things of this world produce dopamine, the neurochemical reward system that can often lead to addiction. But we need dopamine to function. So how do we exist in this world while not conforming to its patterns? That's the question. And I'm going to hang on here for a second since I have you here. How do you think we exist in this world while not conforming to its patterns?
Well, you have to ask God what the right pattern is, and that's where he gives you direction. And you do that by studying his word, which is, of course, in the Bible, and looking at the example of Jesus Christ. I mean, the reason why we are called disciples is because we have a teacher. Jesus was called the teacher at that time, and that's why we and that's why we follow that. And it pretty much speaks for itself.
Yeah, exactly what you said is, and further on that, I talked about this a little bit in my sort of testimony, is one of the things, and I think one of the greatest weapons the enemy uses against us is convincing us that going to church means going to a building on Sundays.
Which is not true at all.
Right. Paul writes later in his letters to Corinth, he wrote in 1 Corinthians 12, if you read all 1 Corinthians 12, you know it's a beautiful illustration of how you could play a part in God's kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
But at the very end of 1 Corinthians 12:27, it says, now you are the body of Christ, and each of you is a part of it. So as part of the body of Christ, it's our duty to sort of maintain this relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
And if we sort of ignore God and just do what he asks of us, well, like not maintaining a relationship with him, the illustration that comes to my mind, it's like you're a husband who goes away to work but never comes home. Yeah, have you ever thought of it that way?
Never thought of it that way. That's actually a pretty good illustration too.
Yeah, that's not a happy marriage.
No,
like, sure,
it's not. It's not a happy relationship, and you don't want a relationship like that.
Right. So another quoting of myself here, just to finish out quoting myself. A lot of Christians answer these calls from God to go out and try and change the world without paying any attention to their own health. In fact, they'll often treat the despair they experience in the world with their work from God with things from this world.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll go and I don't know, drink a lot or play a lot of video games just to
or even just not even taking care of yourself in general. I mean, that's something. I mean, if you are going to embody something like that is your deepest belief, it has to start with you taking care of yourself and not self-help or anything like that. That's just really glorifying yourself. You're honoring the relationship you have with your creator by taking care of the body that he has given you. And you're doing that. And if you do that, you're in service to others.
Right. And we talked a little bit about this before, but I think this is a really good time to bring it up to our groups. We believe in this sort of target, like how to really prioritize things in your life. You have yourself, your family, your community, your state, and the world. A lot of people who answer these calls, sort of ignore yourself, and if you do that, you're definitely out of order. But something I think is a really powerful thing, is something that we can reveal to our audience at this moment. But one of the hobbies we share is archery. We share archery as a hobby, and that's why I thought this sort of target really makes sense for this, especially in this sense. The original Hebrew definition of sin is actually an old Hebrew word meaning to miss the mark.
I did not know that.
Really? You didn't know that?
No. Now I know. Now I have a better idea.
Right. So it's basically if you're sinning, you're missing the mark. And people have this idea of sins. It's just don't break the 10 Commandments or whatever. It's like, no, you can like obey all the commandments and still sin. Yeah. And that's a really complex thing. A lot of followers never hear. But in your walk, you want to be on target in the sense that you want to aim for the middle. And we have this sort of illustration for our audience. But you want to start with yourself. Start with the man in the mirror. Then you can worry about your family, your community, your state, your world. If you do it backwards, where you just try and save the world without focusing on yourself, you're going to always be off target. One of my favorite movies is The Patriot. I love that movie. Do you remember the scene when he went to save Heath Ledger from being arrested? And he took on like 20 guys with just he and his two sons ambushed a small battalion of British soldiers. Right. Do you remember what he said to his son, his youngest son, old enough to fire a musket? You know what he said right before? Don't miss the mark. Well, no, close. He said, "Aim small, miss small. Aim small, miss small." So aim for the smallest target and you won't miss the target. So in life, like what Mel Gibson is saying to his son in The Patriot, aim for your deepest relationship with God, starting with yourself. And then naturally, God will bless these outer rings around you, your family, your community, the state around your community, and the world around your state. And that's a powerful metaphor I think we can draw. And then of course this will be for our groups, and I'll ask the same thing of our audience since they're listening. And again, if you guys are in our groups, we have these open discussions in our groups, and we have breakout discussions that go deeper. But just at the surface level open discussion, there's two questions to ask. Am I spending more time with God, or am I spending more time with things in this world? And then next is, are my goals aligned with what has God called me to accomplish in life? And the next slide is, what now? And if you're spending more time with things of this world than with God, reduce that amount. And next, if you have goals in life that don't align with God, deprioritize those and prioritize God's goals above them. And that being said, just keep in mind, you might have goals that don't align with God, and that's okay. If you have goals that, like I have a goal, I want a new Xbox. Doesn't align with God, but I want a new Xbox. But I need to put God before that. So what does God want me to, where does God want me to commit my finances before I put stuff away for stuff I want? And where does God want me to spend my time, like on this podcast, like with our groups, before, going out and spending thousands of dollars to travel the world or whatever, there's just stuff to consider in that mental exercise of doing those things. is all part of it. And lastly, I just close with 2 Timothy 1:9, and I like to close in a devotion. But in 2 Timothy 1:9, it says, "He has saved us and called us to a holy life, not because of anything we have done, but because of his own purpose and grace. This grace is given us Jesus Christ before the beginning of time." So that's just one of those fun reminders that it's not because of who we are that he's chosen us. It's because of what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants us to be a part of his kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And tying this to my testimony of what you've heard on this podcast, if you listen to it, is there's constant spiritual battlefield. There's constant reaching from the enemy to try and grab us to do what the enemy wants from us. But we have to constantly overcome that reach and reach for God to pull us away from the enemy. And that's the end of my devotion. Anything you want to add before we say goodbye?
You pretty much have taken the helm with this. I say thank you for all of that. And in the next devotion, we'll be going into a little bit deeper on spiritual warfare and how you can equip yourself for battle. That will be a devotion that I will tie into as we look into deeper meaning of the armor of God in Ephesians 6. So until then, goodbye and Godspeed. See ya. Thank you for watching this episode of Virilis Podcast. If you want to listen to any more of our episodes, you could go to our website. You can also check out for any devotionals that we have that would prove useful to you or anybody else in your circle. Also, if you want to get started on a group of your own, you could download the blueprints and any other content that would prove useful to you. Until then, good luck and Godspeed.